I've planned a rather small conference for this year. It's just a dozen scientists, but they are truly world-class scholars, the most distinguished experts in their respective fields, specifically those connected with the research of the brain and consciousness, in order to jointly attempt to understand how we might make significant progress in our investigations and the revelation of the fundamental laws governing the emergence of natural consciousness, the consciousness that exists within nature itself. What exactly is consciousness in the Darwinian understanding? How did it emerge from a state of non-existence within the realm of living creatures that previously lacked consciousness? And by what specific laws did its development occur? And what does it truly represent in its essence? That is the fundamental concept behind this conference.
This is a unique opportunity, and I've participated in the previous two. In that sense, the fact that we're trying to gather to get perhaps not necessarily 100% agreement, because I think this would be difficult, but the fact that we are getting to at least define what are the experiments that need to be done, this is a great advancement.
It has been great to meet the colleagues and to have discussion and even to have very strong disagreement in some cases concerning our point of view, our theories. What is really useful, particularly for us as empirical scientists, is to discuss together about the kind of experiment that can solve our controversies.
Since I'm first time joining this type of discussion, I'm kind of baffled by many of the statements here. First of all, I think consciousness starts from a human concept, right? We humans feel we are conscious. So from this to extend to animals or to machines, we have to define what is a conscious. The consciousness in human have a lot of cognitive phenomenon.
And somehow we experience the sight of a beautiful sunset or the taste of coffee. How does this happen? How does our brain transform sensory signals into the world and the self that we experience? So my research brings together neuroscience and psychology and philosophy and increasingly artificial intelligence to try and make progress on this fundamental question.
When we look around at human beings, we can demonstrate several levels of consciousness. There's cognitive consciousness, there's phenomenal consciousness, and in animals we can ask the same questions, are there the same kinds of consciousness? Animals we know have high intelligence, many of them, but does that imply that they also have phenomenal consciousness like we do?
What is also unique in this conference is what I mentioned before, this landscape, the opportunity to have this Darwinian lens into your thinking. Okay, so I mean this is exceptional. When you see all of this, you need to consider your problems from a Darwinian perspective and ask what I say. I mean, perhaps there is no threshold, there is a gradual evolution of consciousness, and consider that for your theories, approaches, experiments, or whatever.
I think the difficulty is that we do not have direct access to animals' minds in the same way as we do to our own and to others. I can ask you, do you have a headache today? Or do you feel sad or happy? And you can give me a direct answer. That gives me access. And we can't have the same kind of interaction with the animals we study.
Then, obviously, in terms of the content of consciousness, there could be a large variability that depends on how is the nervous system of the animals, how many sensory organs has the animals, how much experience during his lifetime has had the animal. So I'm ready to accept that, say, worms have some sort of experience, that you feel something to be a worm. But I am not claiming that the feeling of the worm should be the same as the feeling of a human being.
So I would consider consciousness at a different level. Right? A basic consciousness, many animals, they all have some sort of learning memory system. Their storage of this learning memory, the way they perceive the world, are very similar to conscious access. They may also have so-called, their memory is a template. In other words, their previous, especially episodic memory or long-term memory that are stored in the brain. So animals use that as a basis to understand the world.
We do not have direct access to any animal that can't tell us what's inside its mind, whether what it feels, what it thinks. We can't talk to the animals. So all our access to this question is indirect through experiments by which we try to explore whether they feel and think, but we do not for any animal have a simple, universally agreed answer.
All that you see here are from the collections, and all the collections are sampled throughout Galapagos.
Yeah, different.
It's a unique kind.
Yeah, it's a unique. Yeah.
Probably in the future it's going to be an alter.
That is a paratype,
Yeah.
and the holotype
Yeah.
deposited in other museums.
Yeah.
Let me show you these small ladybugs.
Oh.
Tiny. They are so tiny. So, what is beauty about this?
And it's very special being here on the Galapagos, just seeing so many wonderful birds, especially the albatross, I think. The waved albatross, or Galapagos albatross as the locals call them. And just, thinking about their majestic nature, the way they prepare for life, the way they are separated for so much time of the year, and then when they reunite to come and breed and feed their chicks, it's quite remarkable. So it's my love of birds really that led me both into my science, which is really studying the behaviour and psychology of the mind.
I tend to think that it evolved independently in birds and mammals. This is currently my best take. I'm pretty certain that birds and mammals are consciously aware. I'm a little more hesitant for other animal species that we would have parted from much earlier, even though they seem to be at the verge of something very interesting. But I would like to see more empirical data before I accept that they are really consciously aware, just as we are.
So if you want a short answer to the order in which things arose, I would say that cognitive consciousness is very ancient. Maybe most animals in the animal kingdom have that capacity. It gets more and more sophisticated, of course. But phenomenal consciousness, to feel things the way we do, I believe was really quite a recent innovation in evolution. And it may not have evolved until social life demanded it.
People on this boat, people in this conference, in this meeting, have very different ideas about consciousness, about which animals are conscious, the distribution of consciousness, about what consciousness requires, and so on.
I don't think we're going to crack the consciousness question anytime soon. It's such a big problem. It would be very arrogant to think that we were just going to be able to solve it just like that as a eureka moment after 100 years.
If we come to to a list of possible tests, that will be a very big step forward.
The list we made at the last day is, for me, a sign of a progress. This is something we didn't have before, and this would open an opportunity to really study consciousness in different animal species and different animal groups.
What we did was identify the properties of living systems, explained how they came about, developed our ability to predict and control. I think we can do exactly the same with consciousness. We don't have to explain how and why it's part of the universe. Maybe we will get there in the end, but I think a much more productive strategy is to dissolve the sense of mystery rather than trying to attack it head on.